Traders, how are you? With Marcello. Today we're going to be doing the recap of what happened in the markets last week, October 2nd edition. So we had a lot of things going on this week. Market finally basically just turned worst pullback since May on Tuesday of last week. So most of the US markets were all negative. We did have a situation where we had rising bond yields as well, near 3-month highs, because a lot of people are still worried about that. Let me see if I can get the little. I got a new format here, so all of you guys watching on YouTube, let me know what you guys think. It's kind of self-editing, which is great. And you guys that are listening to the podcast, which obviously you guys can't see on YouTube, right? You guys can follow on YouTube if you want. Just search for Day Trading Academy English, and the channel should come up there because we have different channels. So we have the global market fears. Obviously, we have a situation where Robert Kiyosaki, which was the uber famous book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, talking about a potential crash in October. But obviously we had a situation where mostly we even had the Fed this week admit inflation might not be temporary, might last longer than we thought. So overall for the week, the overseas market news, the DAX in Germany also went down 3.6%. First negative month since January of 2022, worst month since October of 2020. So first negative month since the beginning of the year, worst month since October 2020. This is due to the fact that they had elections. The center-left called Social Democrats emerged as the strongest party. They had about 24%. The current Prime Minister Merkel, which has been running the countries for uber amount of years, they got the second amount of highest votes, but nobody was expecting that this party would come in and do that. Now, if you guys remember last week, I talked to you guys a lot about how the people in Germany were moving their money out of Germany into Switzerland to be able to go ahead and avoid the expectation of a lot of higher taxes. And there's even a situation in Berlin where they're going the communist route, where they're expropriating apartments from people to be able to help rents in Berlin. I'll get to that in just a moment here towards the end of the video. The Eurozone inflation jumped to a 13-year high, which is the highest since 2008. European markets were also lower for the week, with the Euro stocks, which I'm not mistaken is in Amsterdam, and that went down over 3%, which is the biggest loser there in Europe. Latin American and Canadian, I always say Canadian markets were mixed. Canada, I'm just going to say Canada from now on, just so you guys know. Canada went down 1.09%, and then in the Middle East and Africa, we had a situation where Nigeria was the biggest winner there, even though overall markets there were mixed. And in the far east, Australia and Asia, we had the Nikkei in Japan drop the most of all, even though we had a situation that, China's been rumbling a few things. They're even shutting down factories now to be able to try to meet their carbon emissions, which is, I'm going to get to that in just a second. In Bitcoin and cryptocurrency news, don't have a lot of news this week in that space other than the fact that El Salvador started to process or mine Bitcoin with volcano power, which is, geothermal power, if you didn't know. They made, if I'm not mistaken, $269 so far mining Bitcoin. For the week, Bitcoin is up 13.75% to just over 47,000. For the year, it's up almost 64%. Other than that, in commodities, crude went up 2.56%. That's U.S. crude. International Brent also went up quite a bit. This is due to the fact that we have a sign that the market is tightening. Obviously, the dollar went down. If you guys remember last week, we had that huge drop in precious metals, and then they recovered this week after the dollar kind of flip-flopped again. And we have a global energy crunch as well. One of the things that's really interesting is we have a power plant in Germany that may run out of coal due to the supply chain problems. Now, supply chain problems, what does that mean? Well, I'll just give you some examples. The semiconductor shortage, right? They can't find the containers because of the COVID and things shutting down and things moving and things being where they're not supposed to be. We have a situation where containers aren't where they used to be or where they're supposed to be, and they aren't going where they need to be either. So there's this huge kind of mess all over the world when it comes to the supply chain. And then on top of that, we have shortages because of COVID outbreaks. If you guys remember a few weeks ago as well, the third largest port in the world, which is in China, just shut down because of a COVID outbreak. Just stop, full stop. And so this is definitely a big issue where obviously, this is going to affect everybody. And obviously with the shortages, the economy is opening back up again, right? We have a few countries in Europe that are removing all restrictions, all COVID restrictions. We even have Argentina and Chile finally opening up their borders as well. So things are kind of starting to move. And with demand exploding, the supply not being there, the product not being there, obviously that causes the prices to go up as well. Precious metals are higher on Thursday. Silver went up after reversing days of losses, so those definitely recovered this week. I got my hand quite a bit into some of those silver miners. You guys know I still owe you guys that video about how I'm trading right now with the silver miners a little bit more long term. And one of the things that I thought was extremely interesting was that Robert Kiyosaki did an interview with Kitco News. Kitco is actually a precious metals dealer. And he said that the biggest crash of our lifetime is coming in October. He thinks that Bitcoin, gold, and also silver is going to go down in addition to stocks. But as we kind of go through this crash, let's say Bitcoin, he says gold and silver should actually skyrocket. And one of the things that he says as well, which I agree with, which is the best time to get rich is during a crash. And he says that the one that's coming is going to be very good, an exceptional crash, which means it's going to be really bad. And if you guys don't know, I before they took down the channel for Day Trading Academy on YouTube, they just deleted it for no reason, I think. But one of the traders or investors that I follow and admire most is Jim Rogers. There's a pending interview that I did about 1.5 years ago, 2 years with him that I'm going to upload to the channel as well. But he even said of how we're going to have this rise and this depression of our lifetime, essentially is what he called it, the crash of our lifetime. So I'm going to just show you that quick little snippet just so you guys can see it, because it's about a minute long or so you guys can see it. I thought it was very good. I don't know if we're going to get the actual crash in October. October is actually not the worst month for the stock market. I'm going to do a video kind of going in a little bit more depth about this. September is actually the worst month, but we've had biggest days of crashes, the worst crashes, some of the worst crashes that we've had actually in October. So check out the video. So during the Great Depression in 1929, that created the most millionaires at any other point in the history of the world, which I think is pretty interesting. So prepare yourself. It's time to get rich. So other than that, financial and banking news, political standoff with the Democrats, which is the Biden's party and the majority in the United States government at the moment, and Republicans, which is the minority party, and that they need to agree to raise the debt limit before October 18th. I'm sure you just saw it there in that video with Robert Kiyosaki. If they don't do that, the Treasury Department is going to run out of cash and they're not going to be able to pay their bills. And they're only going to have incoming tax receipts for paying their bills. Now, at the moment, just so you can kind of get a sense of the magnitude of the debt, the United States right now has $28.4 trillion in debt, which is about 130% of the size of the economy. If you remember, I've talked to you guys a lot about how when a country gets to about 100% of the economy, a lot of problems happen. The reason why it hasn't happened just yet to the U.S. is because we are the reserve currency of the world, meaning everybody uses the U.S. dollar. We're still the largest economy in the world as well. But for every dollar that we spend, we have to borrow 20%. Right? So one of the reasons why they're probably not going to do anything in regards to this inflation issue is to the fact that if they do raise the interest rates, if they start to go up, then the cost of our debt is going to increase. Skyrocket actually is the right way to say it. So that's going to be something that's very interesting to see what they're actually going to do. A lot of prominent economists and some analysts online say they can't raise rates. So which means that inflation is going to get worse, not better. So prepare yourself, because even London now is getting gas shortages. The benchmark's 10-year Treasury yield went up again, highest level since June. The Federal Reserve Chairman, which is Powell, Federal Reserve, if you guys don't know, is the central bank in the United States. They run our monetary affairs. He says that higher inflation might last longer than expected. Go figure. You and I already knew that now, didn't we? World's top central banks warned on Wednesday as well that supply constraints can thwart global economic growth, and it could still get worse, keeping inflation elevated longer even if current even if current spike in prices remains temporary. So notice how they're doing a bait and switch, right? First it was no, the prices are going to go up right now, but then it's not going to last that long. And now they're saying, well, it might last longer than we thought it did, and if it does, then it might be a bigger problem than we thought it would be. See how it works? Economic news: Goldman Sachs is cutting its economic growth for China for the year 2021. Remember, China's still the second largest economy in the world. I actually looked up an interesting fact that I think you guys would like to hear. The Eurozone at one point was the largest economy in the world, but now they're actually number 3. So it's the US, China, then the Eurozone. If you don't count the Eurozone as a whole, it's US number 1, China, and then Japan and Germany. And then we kind of, get mixed in there between India and the UK and France and Brazil, etc. Japan's industrial output fell for the second consecutive months. Obviously, this has to do with the COVID-19 outbreaks, in addition to the fact that they have the semiconductor chip shortage. Obviously, Japan's economy with Toyota and Honda and Nissan, that's a big chunk of their economy. Eurozone unemployment fell as well. Remember, it's a 19-country block on the Eurozone, so that went down to 7.5%. And the UK's economy grew more than expected in the quarter 2, so they're no longer the worst performing economy in the G7, which is a group of the 7 largest economies in the world. Italy now is the worst. 2020 and 2021 National Survey of Living Conditions conducted by researchers at the Andres Bello Catholic University say that 76.6% of people in Venezuela are living in extreme poverty. So if you guys don't know, they went through a socialist revolution with Chavez. If you guys don't know that Cuba also was in a socialist revolution, and Argentina in the 1900s was the most prosperous nation in the world. They've now had 70 years of what's called Kirchnerismo or Peronismo. Perón was one of the presidents that instituted kind of their new socialist revolution, and they all have extreme poverty. So for all of you guys that want to live socialism in the United States, I would think twice about that before you want to implement that, even though we're unfortunately headed in that direction, in my opinion. So before the COVID-19 collapse, they had 67.7% of people in extreme poverty. So they're saying because of the gas shortages, in addition to the COVID-19 pandemic, that's why it actually went up by so much. And 20% of the people that responded in the survey said that part of the reason why they're in that situation is because they can't find fuel, they can't find gas to go to work. Obviously, that would probably be something that's pretty important to have, right? Because if you have a job, you're expected to kind of go there. And there, if some of you are asking, well, why don't they just work from home? They have power shortages, and their infrastructure isn't that good, unfortunately. Corporate news: UK-based Rolls-Royce surged 11.3% after they announced a huge 30-year contract that was worth $2.6 billion to put engines on planes in the U.S. military. If you guys didn't know, Rolls-Royce doesn't just sell overly expensive cars, they also sell overly expensive jet engines as well. World's leading semiconductor manufacturer Micron Technology exploded 115% after their revenue grew 30% from a year ago. And in other inflation news, the Dollar Tree, where everything in the store is $1, has now announced that the $1 era is over. They're going to start increasing prices, and they're probably going to have $3 to $5 prices in some of the shelves. So let's assume they just go up by 20 cents, right? Instead of $1, some of the products are $1.20, maybe $1.30. The government is telling us the inflation is only 5.2%, although we have rents going up nationally by 20-30%, and even prices at a dollar store going up by over 20-30%. You guys see how you connect those dots? And that's really why I do these videos, right? So leave a like, because that's the best kind of corporate news there is. CarMax, which is the car dealership in the United States as well, they crashed after their revenue went down by 30% at the end of August due to the inventory shortages mounting. So obviously, if you guys don't know, we have that semiconductor issue where the chips basically that go into the electronics, everything from cars to refrigerators, everything uses these chips. And so since we have a shortage, they can't make the new cars, which means that the used car prices are exploding, which means that inventory is going low because people need to go out and buy cars and they can't find them, so they're starting to go down in inventory. Other than that, Bed Bath & Beyond, Their stock went down quite a bit as well after they reported hurting or very bad fiscal results in Q2. They're saying that the supply chain issues, again, the shortages, are affecting them as well, in addition to inflation eating their profits. You see how many things we're noticing, right? How many things I'm mentioning. You have the top central banks in the world talking about the supply chain issues. We have the Federal Reserve Bank in the United States talking about, well, inflation might last a little bit longer than expected, which means that it's going to last a lot longer than expected. And then we even have companies saying, well, we didn't have as good results because of supply chains and, the inflation. And you guys see where all this is heading, right? You think, compound this a few months down the line, and I'm going to share with you the gas shortages in England here in just a moment. And Moderna, which is one of the vaccine makers in the world, went down by quite a bit after Merck & Co. announced that they had a new COVID pill that had excellent results. In trade news and technology, Google users are going to soon be able to combine images and search. When they search for things in Google, they have a new program with software, AI software, artificial intelligence, with a new tool called the Google Lens. So you're going to be able to do that on Google. And in investment news, the initial public offerings, which is the first time that a company goes public for a first time, is the highest since the dot-com bubble in 2000. But it is starting to slow. So that tells us two things. One, if we have a situation where there's a global boom in companies going public, we're in a bit of a bubble right now, right? But at the same time, it's starting to cool, which means that the bubble might not last much longer. Efforts of Berlin residents also in investment news. In efforts to lower the fast rising costs there in the German's capital city, they had a voter referendum which they voted to expropriate and socialize 250,000 apartments from the largest real estate company in Europe. So literally just going to take away apartments from a big company and then put rent controls in place, because that works so well for places like New York and San Francisco. So you can see, I thought Germany would be one of the countries, the last countries to fall, but you guys can see even there, they're starting to go to communist. Just, take it away and give it away for free. Single largest manufacturing investment by Ford in its 118-year history. They're investing $11.4 billion with their Korean battery partner called SK Innovation to build an assembly plant and 3 battery plants in the United States. They said on Monday that they're now expecting 40 to 50% of their global vehicle volume to be all electric by 2030. That new F-150 electric, that thing looks amazing, by the way. That thing, I think, is going to make a dent in the industry, meaning that I think that's what's going to kind of allow the market to shift to more electric vehicles, because best-selling vehicle, I think, in the last 40 years in the United States, and now they have the electric option. And even though, if you guys remember the Hummer, that huge boom 10 years ago or 15 years ago with these big trucks, now they're coming out with an electric version too. The Bronco, supposedly, Ford Bronco, which is pretty cool. So I think that's going to really make a dent. And we averted a financial crisis after the Chinese government agreed to give $1.5 billion to Evergrande to be able to go ahead and avert their not paying their debts, which obviously could have caused a pretty serious escalation and points connecting from banks around the world like it did in 2008 and 2009. And in international events, Taiwan's defense minister Chiu Kuang-heng said on Monday that the island needs to have long-range accurate weapons in order to properly deter China after China has been rapidly developing their military to attack the island. This week alone, they sent quite a bit of their Air Force jets through Taiwan's airspace. And if you guys don't know what's going on with Taiwan, essentially China is saying that Taiwan is part of China. I said it backwards. China is saying that Taiwan is part of China, while Taiwan, an independent democratic government, is saying that they should be independent. And if you guys know what's happened in history during the Obama administration, for example, Russia took over Crimea, which is the island/peninsula, which was a part of Ukraine, a completely separate country, and the United States just allowed them to take it. Well, now we have the Biden administration, and if we kind of connect the dots, what may happen now is that even though the U.S. agreed to defend Taiwan, its independence might not happen anymore due to what's happening. So they want to spend over $9 billion over the next 5 years, including new missiles to be able to go ahead and face off the Chinese threat. And satellite imagery and other photos, as well as videos, and the NGO Amnesty International published, said that Poland carried out an unlawful pushback of a group of migrants that are camped out in Belarus. So they're saying that they forced them back without actually making an assessment about what kind of protection they needed in Europe, and international law is required, they said. I don't know if I said that right, but I think you guys got it, yeah? And then Thursday, the UK announced that a gas station crisis has been averted, supposedly. The government is saying that they forced military truck drivers to drive the gas trucks to be able to get the gas where it needs to be, even though many pumps in London are still closed, leaving a lot of people waiting hours. There were hundreds of cars I saw on social media to be able to just fill up their tank. And the government is repeatedly saying that they're easing the problem by having the military drive their trucks. And if you guys see what's happening, for example, in the United States, obviously a lot of governments, even the federal government, is banning the vaccines, and they're actually firing people. United Airlines, for example, announced that they were going to fire, I think it's something like 300 pilots or something, because they wouldn't take the vaccines. So if that happens, for example, in the United States as well, then we might have a pretty big shortage crisis, not only with food, but also with gas, due to the fact that there's going to be a shortage in these workers that bring the infrastructure in as well. And in the natural disasters, there's new fissures that opened up in La Palma, which is the volcano in the Canary Islands, which is part of Spain, even though it's just to the left side of Africa. And if you guys don't know, in 1950, there was a volcanic eruption that actually made a ridge on the top of that mountain. And they're saying that if a powerful enough explosion happens, or if earthquakes happen there, that the entire island can actually collapse, causing hundreds of feet of a tsunami to the eastern seaboard in the United States, and also Europe as well. If you guys haven't watched 2012, the movie, I highly recommend it, because it kind of is that's not the reason why the tsunami happened there in the movie, but obviously, it kind of gives you an idea of what's going to happen. And other than that, volcanoes going off in Hawaii. We have some volcanoes going off. There's some guys that I follow that say that in the next 2 months, we're going to see a lot of activity with the chain of volcanoes in South America. There's a chain of volcanoes just towards the top of South America, north of Ecuador, leading into Colombia. We have another chain in the deep south, let's say, and then we have another chain on kind of in the middle. And just this week, there was earthquakes at a volcano in Mendoza, Argentina, which is kind of towards the bottom. And then we also had a situation where the Chilean government announced an alert about one of the volcanoes there in the south as well. So things are getting heated. That's the news for this week, guys. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a like here on the video, and we'll see you next week.